Yeah, so I work on the services side of Zengenti, looking at what your users need, what the requirements of your organisation are, and then actually working out how we can build something that delivers for those. So just to mark the change from thinking about product to thinking about services, I'd like us to all take a deep breath, right into our bellies. Feel your feet, still there? And then I thought maybe we could turn just to your neighbour and say something meaningful like Lorum Ipsum dolor sit amet consecteta. Not actually ever read that out. So how many of you have come across Lorum Ipsum before and thought, what is that? How many of you have used Lorum Ipsum? Oh, well, look, it's a place of honesty and we're being real. So it's actually very useful. And is anyone who actually you don't really know what Lorum Ipsum is, which is fine as well? Oh no, great. So it's placeholder text, basically, commonly used to demonstrate the visual form of a document without relying on meaningful content. It's also called Greeking. Replacing content with placeholder text allows designers to design the form of the content before the content itself has been produced, and hopefully already you're thinking, I can see a problem with that. The text itself, Lorum Ipsum, is typically a scrambled section of De Finibus Bonorum et Malorum of 1st century BC Latin text by Cicero, just in case you were wondering, but it's been altered, added to, so essentially it's meaningless pretend Latin. I think it would be funny, sort of hot fuzz style, to set up a monastic order where we sit around and chant Lorum Ipsum at each other, but that's just my weird sense of humour. So you can have as much Lorum Ipsum as you like, but of course this is the 21st century. Why stop there? Why not have cat Ipsum? Have any of you used alternatives to Lorum Ipsum? Yeah? Zombie Ipsum? Come across that one? This one I quite fancy, Nietzsche Ipsum. I mean, it's just stupid, isn't it? But you do feel like the holy grail, and I apologise to any vegans, vegetarians, is bacon Ipsum. If you can take that amount of meat in your placeholder text. Don't get confused with the Toyota Ipsum, which is another name for the Toyota Avensis Verso. But is significantly different to all the others. So today, I just want to talk about this. What's wrong with a bit of Lorum Ipsum anyway? What's wrong with a bit of placeholder text while we sort out the form of the content? It's not just that sometimes it sneaks through into real designs. I reckon, personally, can you see that? Where's my little pointer? It's not very well defined. I reckon that's probably deliberate. So much of what's on a wine bottle is just a load of nonsense. I think someone was having a bit of fun, let's put Lorum Ipsum on there. Will anyone notice the difference? But it's not just that sometimes Lorum Ipsum gets through to the final design by accident. It's fundamentally putting the cart before the horse. Designing the container for content before you know what the content is. It's clearly the wrong way around. This is a quote from nearly 10 years ago now. No one shows up at your site looking for user experience. They don't get up in the morning and think, I can't wait to see a website that's just really well structured today. You know, I really like some cool interactions, move from one page to another, maybe a drop-down menu with some options within it. People have lives. They have jobs that they're trying to get done. They have tasks that they want to complete. They actually want to do stuff. They actually want to find stuff. And it's the stuff that comes before the way of organising the stuff. So that's the problem with Lorum Ipsum. Using dummy content or fake information in the web design process can result in products with unrealistic assumptions and potentially serious design flaws. We're joking about it, but actually in life or death situations, which do happen, we've got some good examples later, you need your content to be understood, to be properly organised and properly designed. Luke Wroblewski goes on to say, a seemingly elegant design can quickly begin to bloat with unexpected content or break under the weight of actual activity. Fake data can ensure a nice looking layout, but it doesn't reflect what a living, breathing application must endure. Real data does. And again, I think that quote's from nearly 10 years ago. So we've been thinking about this and talking about this for a while, but there's still quite a lot of Lorum Ipsum around. I love the old flying machines, and I love the fact that people kind of designed them and they looked at them and they thought, is this viable as a flying machine? Looks about right. It's kind of bird-like, or it's got wings, or yeah, will probably do the job. Does it work in real conditions? No, not for a minute. And that seems to be the approach to our design sometimes, is that we think, yeah, kind of looks like it'll do the job, probably works with real content, put in the real content, oh, doesn't work at all. An analogy that I like to use is that sometimes we approach things this way around, where we think, how are we going to present stuff? So we think about what's the container like that the content lives in, and so we focus on things like information architecture. I want to give a gift to somebody, I reckon this box is going to do the job. We've done IA on it, right? So we know that we've got the walls which conceal the gift. That's helpful. The lid on the top for easy access to the gift when you need to get to it. And actually, when you unfold that, it tessellates, which is efficient. So that, production-wise, is going to be brilliant. We've got UX. This proud, unhinged lid makes it easy to remove quickly for someone who's keen to get to the gift inside. And the corners are great for holding the weight when you want to stack lots of these. Again, this is an efficient production. Design-wise, we've given a contemporary feel. It's on brand. There's a nice range of web-safe colours, let's say, high contrast. Very on trend at the moment, etc. Development, you know, looking at the materials that it's built out, if it works. We've actually tested this with users and they love the design. So what could possibly go wrong? All we need to do is get the gift and put it inside. And there's where it all falls down. It doesn't fit, it doesn't match, colours clash, fundamentally it doesn't work. We need to be working with real content in our prototypes, in our designing process. No respected architect would plan out rooms without first considering the activities that would occur in those rooms. No caterer would lay out a buffet with serving platters without first planning the content of those dishes to determine the best style, form and size for the job. And it's the same in designing websites, or if you're a gift kind of person, I think that says it all. Wait for it. Hey, there we go. Okay, so even when we're working with real content as much as possible, these are, I talked to one of our testers, and these are some of the things that frequently come up. Unexpectedly large or small section content that doesn't work in designs that we're looking at. Long URL query string, so the content is all fine until you migrate your real content in there, and there's a massive, great big URL with all kinds of junk on there that's just been pasted into the content as it is. Because actually, how does that break up onto the lines, and all of a sudden that's not looking so clever. And giant images, although it sounds like we've got that covered from Rich's presentation just now. But there are all kinds of things that can actually break once we put real content in. So we should be thinking about real content earlier on. But it's more than that. I think if we're using Lorum Ipsum, we're actually admitting that, or rather we're not admitting that content challenges haven't been addressed yet. Or we don't really know what we're doing with the content, so just whack some bacon Ipsum in there. It's a sign they've not been addressed. It's kind of a way of delaying decisions about content, and that's the more fundamental problem. So, you know, when we're coming into designing new systems, designing new websites, there are certain things we should have in place at the very least. Content strategy. Actually, there's a plan overall for what we want to do with content, including aims, production, workflow, governance. Content audit, so you know what you've actually got. And people say, don't worry, we're going to just lose it all and write everything new from scratch, which actually is a way of doing a project, and it's a perfect legitimate way, and that happens sometimes. But if you haven't learned from what you've already got, then that nice new shiny content, if it ever makes it into the form it needs to be in, will soon become like the old stuff anyway. So you still need to plan, and you need to learn from what you have. So, and on a project level, actually having a content plan for how we're going to get to where we need to be. Actually, if you're starting with new content, you've got the advantage that you can, at an early sketching level, so before you start committing anything into design, you can play around with all sorts of different versions. You can prototype in all sorts of ways, So you can try out and test at that earlier level to see what feedback you get from users early on before you even push a pixel onto the page. Another way I like to think about it is, instead of saying we need a new website or we need a new system to showcase our graduate success stories, or to stop people coming to us for services that we don't offer, or to keep the support line free for genuine emergencies, how can a new website do that? It's actually a change of thinking towards we need some new content to showcase our graduate success stories. What does that look like? And suddenly it's a bit more real. What content will do that rather than we're going to have a new website, somehow we're going to showcase the stories. What's a story? I don't know, we'll kind of figure out as we go. But actually content, let's make it concrete. What new content will stop people coming to you for services that you don't offer? I don't know, or if that's even the right question. They're going to come anyway, perhaps. Some of them are, so what content will help to get them to where they need to be? What new content will keep the support line free for genuine emergencies? It's a different question. Does that make sense? Fundamentally moving from thinking about system to thinking about real content. And I wanted just to share this as a great example I came across recently of solving something content first instead of thinking about the system. So Oxford Brookes have a website, they can do all sorts of things on their website, they do all sorts of communications to people, user needs of all sorts of different kinds, and they were thinking about the user journey of people who apply to Oxford Brookes, and there's lots of communications, of course, there are to get them to apply and to make sure that they're going to come to the university. And there's all sorts of communications all along the way until the point that they actually get their grades, they get a place, they accept the place, and then the communications kind of fall off a cliff. They get sent a pack in the post, and then what? And yet it's one of the best moments of their lives, right? Or it should be. And so the way that Oxford Brookes dealt with it was to think about what content can we actually engage those applicants with at that point, those successful applicants. And they came up with this great and actually really low-cost idea where they set up a little studio in the corner. They briefed lots and lots of people, so this is their Vice-Chancellor. They also got heads of departments for the courses that people had got onto. And it's basically set up this kind of pop-up filming studio, one iPhone, one laptop, really low tech. And what they did was they put out the message that if you tweet the hashtag Hello Brookes and then your student number, because you got in, they'll make you a custom video. And they had loads of props in there, and they just grabbed people as they walked past, and they sometimes managed to get the Vice-Chancellor and other people, and they were like, "Hey, Gabriel, you've got into the university, fantastic to see you, we can't wait till you're here, this guy's going to be directing your studies," etc., etc. 30 seconds, something like that, push it out on social media. People were over the moon at this personalised video. It wasn't just, "Hey, Gabriel," it was actually filmed individually for each of them. And they were over the moon and they shared it, and so it suddenly became a much bigger advert for why Oxford Brookes is the most fun university to be at. And I thought they didn't have to update their website. They used existing channels that were there. Out it goes, solving with a content idea, realising content idea. So that's just one example. Actually, dealing with the issues of real content and solving things through content brings us together, which is great. Everyone has their own requirements, objectives that they want to reach in a project. By bringing content suggestions to the table from day one, you open up discussions about how the content will appear to users and can therefore bridge communication gaps within the team, clients, and external parties from early on. So whatever you've got to bring to the table, bring it to the table. Yeah, that seems less relevant than it did when I put it in. Okay. There's another thing before we look at some actual concrete examples about complexity. So Andy Fitzgerald in Smashing Magazine argues that our systems have become too complex to figure out in abstract. So trying to get your head around planning changes to the system, which is very complicated, is itself very complicated. And actually you can have, in systems design, you can have a white box model, you can have a black box model where everything is hidden, or a white box model where everything is transparent. You make it known what's in there. And by talking about content, you're dealing with knowns, and you're dealing with simple ideas, which then nevertheless affect the complex. So in the space of digital design, if we ensure that our simplest dynamic systems of content, structure, and meaning making work as intended at a foundational level, then we lay the groundwork for larger, more complex systems that also work as intended. So by dealing with real concrete stuff, meaningful content, we're actually able to work and influence a bigger system rather than trying to get our heads around the bigger system. For some reason that makes me think of Jurassic Park with Jeff Goldblum's characters, obviously scientifically sound explanation of chaos theory, charged with a little sexual tension. And, you know, it made me think, you know, if you try... So he's explaining chaos theory based on the little drip of water goes a different way down the hand each time and you can't predict it. And rather than looking at a complex system and trying to predict it, all you need is a hand and a glass of water and you can repeat that. You can look at it, you can observe it, you can work it out. And for me, real content does that. Real content is a hand and a glass of water. And we put them together and we see what happens. As opposed to standing back and trying to figure out chaos theory before we build anything, which quite frankly is how it feels sometimes with our websites. I just want to tackle the myth that we can't wait for content. I've heard UXers, leading UXers say that we can't wait for it all to be ready, that's completely unworkable before we do anything, but it's a bit of a straw man argument because no one's saying it has to be 100% ready. We're saying let's think about it, let's tackle some of the issues, let's get something we can work with that isn't dummy text. I can understand why UXers, UX agencies don't want to deal with the content problems because actually they're the biggest challenge of the project. They just want to do UX and get paid, understandably. But solving the content issues first is the most important thing to do. It's not so much chicken and egg as chickens and chicken coop. You need to know how many chickens you've got and what sort of environment they need before you get a chicken coop, I reckon. So I'd like to actually look now at some prototypes and some experiments with real content rather than dummy content. We're going to look at sketches, we're going to look at mapping, and we're going to look at wireframing. There's a really good article, if you look up Biz Sanford at Spotify about this. We never use Lorum Ipsum at any stage of the design process. We can't know if we're solving the right problem, can't get proper feedback from our peers, can't test anything we use as if there aren't real words in our designs. Content heavily informs our decisions, so if we don't use real stuff, we end up trying to create misinformed experiences. The words on the screen are essential for helping users understand features, find what they're looking for, and actually accomplish their tasks. Thinking about content early gives us lots of time to get feedback from colleagues and users and iterate on different options. And actually they talk about, so it doesn't have to be 100%, but they talk about, especially when they're designing key user journeys, focusing on page headings, section headings, key verbs and nouns, buttons and link text, the really important stuff that's going to guide people through that journey. That's an example from that article where they say don't do this. You can see straight away as soon as you actually say what does a benefit actually look like? What is a benefit rather than a placeholder? Okay, it's got an image, it's got more text to it. They haven't got the whole of the text there, but you can already see that if they're going to have 4 of these, it's going to significantly push the pricing down the page. What does it look like when we want big numbers? So actually let's put those big numbers in there. How does that change how it's going to behave? You can see that straight away. So as an example from one of our projects, sorry you can't see that well. This is from a fire and rescue service. This is sketching the contact page. So you've got a few things going on here. Real emergencies need to dial 999 really fast with no friction. Genuine inquiries that aren't real emergencies need to be able to get in touch quite easily, but we don't want people whose cat is stuck up a tree getting in touch because they're clogging up the line. That's an expense, and cats generally come down on their own. It's one of the things I learned. So what do we do about that? So here's just some sketches where we're using, rather than saying message here or lorem ipsum, we've actually got real words. You don't necessarily need to have a real header if it's the same on every page, but in these sketches it's really important because we need to look at the interplay between the emergency message that's already up there and then what's on the page already. So we've got an emergency message. It's important enough that it needs repeating higher up the page. But do you know what the difference is between a 999 emergency and a non-999? There's some, for me, clearly that's a 999, but there is a grey area. And these guys found with their users that there's quite a lot of grey areas, so do we need this? What's an emergency definition? Guessing that by the time you click that, probably not as much of an emergency as you might have first thought. I don't know. This is just a sketch. This isn't a right answer. This is starting to play with the content. So that says for non-emergencies, please submit the form below. So we're trying to make that differentiation. Actually, you've got subheading in there to try and make out, look, this is the fire service contact details. That's different to 999. So does that work? We've got the common questions down there before you contact us. But as soon as that goes on there, that message, I'm thinking, who's going to see that anyway? You've got the crucial stuff at the top. That's far too low down. But it's a real sketch starting to play with it. So here's another version of the same thing. That should be a link. It's possible to be a link. You're on your mobile, you can just hit that and dial. That's much better, which means we should move that link out of the way so we're not going to get a clash. And now we've lost that subheading because it was just getting too cluttered for what should be a really simple, what's the contact I need? So for other situations, first read the common advice, which has an anchor link down to the common advice, to save both you and us some time, which is a message that the client actually came up with. What's the reason that you want it? It's always good to give a reason. And we've called that common advice to make it a bit simpler. Again, not the final version, but these sketches are working with real messages that are really important to make sure that the interplay between them, the interrelation, is correct. So that was a campaign on the same site, where you've got a large hero image and you've got different elements going on there. I won't say too much about that, but they're real messages from a real campaign. And they straight away raise questions about, there's design questions there about how you get the text over the images, how's that going to work? You've got build questions about, okay, so if these guys can build this themselves, what's the longest message going to be? How are they going to do that? How's that going to lay out? But it's important that you're dealing with the real content. There's a thing that I've highlighted in blue, and then under that, a really important smaller box, but nevertheless, that's the crucial point on this slide. Okay, that one was actually a university page where it was the course finder. 49% of people looking at a university site in a study didn't find the course on the university site, even though it was there. And these sites had course finders on them. So what that was showing was, as well as the course finder, having a link that spells out view all courses A to Z or whatever it said is essential to get people to the whole list so they feel like they're not missing anything, because nearly half of them do miss it. And that is an example of sketching out a mobile menu where we found that actually once we put the real titles in from the information architecture, down the left it said arson, 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 which is not great for the way that people scan looking for the keywords on the left-hand side. And actually, how can we rework that menu to make sure that we need to go back to the information architecture and rework it. So there's all kinds of ways that you can sketch and play with content. I like to get post-it notes all over the place. There are all sorts of ways you can do it. But the crucial thing is that we're doing it with real content. If you're not familiar with the role of content designer, or you don't have a content designer on your team, and you'd like to find out more about that, I think it's a role that's emerged over the last few years that's absolutely essential for putting content at the heart of our designs and what we do. So moving from sketching to mapping, you see, why not go to wireframes at this point? Well, wireframes rushes the build. As soon as you show someone a wireframe, they want it built. I mean, change that bit, but essentially build it now. We've seen it, we've visualized it, promised land, do it. And actually, if you haven't tackled the content challenges before this point, what are you going to build? It can also kill creativity. There's this interesting idea that the final design is never that far away from the first wireframe. So if the wireframing is supposed to be time when we prototype and play with ideas and change things, but the final design is basically the first one, it's actually killing the creativity in the process. Prioritises visual concerns over user needs. We all start thinking about little bits of drop down this and drop down that, and should that be a darker shade of grey? We're fixing it very quickly. And actually, a lot of the behaviour that's implied in a wireframe is in the designer's head, and developers and testers have a hard time getting that out of them. So content mapping, where we break down the content before we put it into a visual design, is a really helpful process. Priority guides, a content-first alternative to wireframes, or, for us, a crucial step before the wireframes. They're about content rather than visual layout. So here is an overview priority guide. Now this is of a real page, so that as it exists now, it's a product page, project we're working on. Straight away, by creating an overview, even just at this level, we need to prioritize. We've made it narrow, we're forcing the issue of what's the most important content. Pricing message, all the way down there. Is price important? Licensing, how you get this product is through licensing. Licensing is really far down. And download sample, well, the download is probably the key action that happens on that page before inquiries about licensing and pricing. They're all below features, USPs, specifications even. If a user wants specifications, they're more likely to dig for them. Possibly, that's worth testing. And contact right at the bottom. So straight away, by mapping out the sections that are on a page, we can see some challenges to that page. A detailed priority guide then breaks it down into real content that's on the page, a description of the elements, so that's the heading 1, and then notes about how some of that behaves. But it's not to do with layout, it's not to do with visual, it's everything that's on the page. And there's some great advantages to breaking down the content in this way first. They can be really, really long. That's the bottom of that particular guide. Could probably have shown you about another 4 screens that came in between those two. The advantages of breaking them down like this, we're focused on meeting user needs rather than visual desires. Prompts content discussion decision early on, that's what we've been talking about. We're talking about, when we actually put the content in there, known content rather than Lorum Ipsum, so it's realistic content requirements. We start to identify content types because we're breaking down what's on the left-hand side, and developers love it because all of a sudden we can say, right, that's a component, we can reuse that across the site. And actually visual designers love it for the same reason. We're not wasting time on visual things that prompt lots of discussion that just isn't as important right now. It forces us to assign priority, which is brilliant, and it's great for responsive design. As long as we know what's the most important thing on this page, say, then actually we've got the order for whatever size the viewport. Oh, there's more. It's keeping that creative possibility open rather than tying it down. Provides real content for wireframes and designs to come. Useful for developers and testers, we've already talked about. Also provides a rationale to stakeholders. Before you get all worked up about the homepage, have a look at the priority guide of everything that needs to be on here, all the different states that might have to be covered, and the reasons that we've got for prioritizing one thing over another, rather than just a reaction to, I don't like the look of it. And it's cheap prototype for testing. It's a spreadsheet, can move things around easily. So that's just a really quick introduction to priority guides. I've got 9 seconds left to tell you about wireframes. I love that quote. I'm not even sure why. It feels very zen. Content gives mountains to design. Real content, it's the real deal basically. I know we've got St. George's in the house today, so just some things from St. George's project. Wow, I can't read it. That's real content, but it might as well not be. It kind of looks slightly Arabic from here. But where possible, we're actually designing with real images, real content. And I have worked with designers before who said, don't give real content in wireframes, because then people react to the content and not the design. And you're like, yes, exactly. They care about the content, not the design, and they should, and we should be having those conversations. Yeah, but I just want to get sign off with my wireframes. So there were some examples. There is actually some placeholder text there, real English rather than Lorum Ipsum, but just to show that you can't get 100% of the content all the time. So you can see study I've highlighted at the top. Click on that, it opens an overlay. There's the menu. We click on undergraduate, opens a new menu. We actually can test that real menu with real words, with real people, real users, and see where we get to. And this is how we approach wireframing. But one of the things to say is quite often when we test things like information architecture, it's really important to notice mostly you're testing words, not structure. Because it's people, that's all they've got, is the words to find the thing that they're looking for. And so real content helps because you're going to learn about it when you do these tests. You could do all these things, but it's not really about not using Lorum Ipsum. It's about using real content wherever you can and having the difficult, hard work conversations about content as early as possible to make your projects wild successes. I've long believed that real data delivers really effective design. Using actual content, information, activity throughout the design process to inform and guide decisions results in product designs that scale well and communicate effectively. Thanks for listening.